Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Javar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. This is part 2 of Peah, chapter 6, Halacha 3. We have been talking about something that you might scratch your head and wonder. Why are we talking about, we're trying to study Torah, why are we sitting here trying to go over details about how a farmer and his workers pick up the sheaves? What is magical and mystical? What is deep and profound about it? Why do we care about other technical dry things like whether we're planting onions for seeds and we're not going to harvest them, we're just going to use them for seeds? Why do we care about any of this stuff? And I want to read from the Chazan Ish's book on faith and trust. And in the second chapter, it's morality and halacha. And I want you to look at the way the Chazan Ish is looking at these technical things. Keep in mind, a lot of the commentary we use is on the Beurim by the Chazan Ish. The Chazan Ish spent an inordinate amount of time trying to dig into the Yerushalmi and understand it so he could update the agricultural laws of Eretz Yisrael. And it does matter, says the Chazan Ish, to sit there and to dig into these sorts of technical, dry things. Chapter 7, in the second chapter of Morality and Halacha, or the seventh part of it, Zayin, the learned, he says, the learned in matters of moral teachings found that there are two types of Torah learning that influence a person. So Chazan Ish is saying that the people who study a lot see that there's two types of Torah learning that influence a person. Chazan Ish continues, says, one is learning about the obligation to observe the law and to act accordingly to it, he continues, says, one develops a live awareness of what one should be aware of and learns to pay attention to who is commanding all this. Hashem, master of the worlds, creator of all creations, and acknowledges the sin of ignoring his existence and the extent of the punishment for it. Here's what the Chazan Ish says about this second type of Torah study. He writes, the other type of Torah study is the study of the details of the halacha in each and every case. The labor of Torah has the power to purify the soul, refine and polish it, thus bringing one upon one of the pleasant feelings of holiness and purity and instilling deep in one's heart a feeling of disgust toward undue frivolity and passing pleasures. In addition, the labor of Torah learning results in tremendous love and devotion to the observation of the details of the mitzvah, the halachot of which he is laboring over, and his innermost self will tell him that this is what he was created for. So the Chazan Ish is writing in his book about morality and halacha as a key part of faith and trust, and that we have to really be mindful to try to focus getting into these technical details because they do matter and they're part of refining ourselves. And not only are we commanded in the Torah D'Oraita to guard the commandments and to guard the ordinances, but I mean, basically the best way to guard the ordinances is to learn about them. Not only to learn about them, to learn about them in the details. There's a great sugya in the Yerushalmi that says something very surprising. It says you should, even if there's a Torah scholar who's an angry person, angry and wrathful and has a lot of really bad character traits, okay, says that you should cling to him over somebody who's an Amma Aretz, who's really religious and really pious. And why would that be? Because the Torah scholar who has an anger problem can refine himself through learning. And he also knows the commandments. And okay, he's human. He has a problem with what he's doing, But as long as he's really a Torah scholar, he's not talking kfirah, he's not talking heresy, he's really digging into the details and really trying to work on it and refine himself, that is somebody that's worthy to spend time with, says the Gemara, says the Yerushalmi. But somebody who is really religious and God-fearing and doesn't know anything, doesn't understand the laws, doesn't understand the details, the implications, that's a dangerous person to be around, because they're going to be wrong on the things, and they're going to be really religious about being wrong on it. In other words, they're not going to understand why they're wrong, but they're going to be wrong with a lot of strength. So I want to give you some chizuk on why you should care about these details and why you're actually doing something meaningful, says the Chazan Ish, who, by the way, labored over these exact same sugyas. And after laboring and writing his Beur, he came to write this book. And this is what he's talking about. So let's continue. In the course of the preceding discussion, it was mentioned that a row of 3 sheaves is not subject to shchicha. So remember that if you have 4 and 5, right, sheaf number 4 and sheaf number 5, in other words, 2 sheaves, right, it doesn't constitute a row. You need 3. And if you go to the middle one, that, you still have a row, depends what you do, okay? So we're going to explore the parameters of this law. There are, the end of this chapter, there are a few cases that are unresolved. The magic about putting these unresolved cases into the Shas is because these are going to act as simanim so that you can see who the real Eliyahu HaNavi is. These are tools for us to be able to understand in the messianic process who is really Eliyahu HaNavi, who's really the Messiah, because they're going to understand the resolution of these things. Today we can look at it, and we're going to see some of them, and we could spend hours arguing either way, and we don't know what is the real resolution of the law. These messianic figures are going to be able to come and explain this. So the Gemara leaves these, my opinion is the Gemara leaves these unexplained, unresolved inquiries as part of the messianic process so that it will be a siman, and we'll be able to see who's really authentic and who's not. The other part about this, we're going to get a great famous story, and this famous story is going to have context. It's a little out of order, but the ending of there's going to be another sugya that's after this famous story, and then the rest of the sugyas are gonna follow the logical point of this story, so it's not out of place. Okay, so Gemara reads like this. It says, if one sheaf in a row of sheaves was relatively large, and the harvester removed only the outer side of a sheaf, in other words, the side facing him to the threshing floor, there is no question that the remaining inner side of the sheaf is judged in conjunction with the 2 sheaves ahead of it as a 3-row sheaf that is exempt from shchicha. If, however, you remove the inner side of the sheaf, what is the law insofar as judging the remaining outer side in conjunction with the 2 sheaves ahead of it in a row of 3 consecutive sheaves? So you have this case where, let's say, you have sheaf number 4, sheaf number 5, sheaf number 6. And one of them is going to be much bigger. Let's say it's 3 times the size, okay? Let's say it's sheaf number 5, okay? And, or let's say it's sheaf number 6, okay? That way it's not in the middle of the row, okay? And he goes ahead and he takes the outside of the sheaf, okay? So he takes away 1.5 times the size of it, and he removes that part, okay? So that the inside of the part is still connected with sheaf number 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so it's saying that there's no problem with that, and that it should be, it should be ahead of them because it's still connected in a row. But now they're saying, no, what happens if this sheaf that's 3 times the size sheaf number 6, right, is now they, for whatever reason, the guy comes and he removes, 1.5 times the size of it from the inside of it, leaving the outside of it. What's going to be the law on that? In other words, is that still going to remain connected with this row, or by removing this abnormally large sheaf from the inside to take away this part that may have been connecting it, just leaving an outside part, which also, by the way, would be spaced differently than the other ones, right? Because it was bigger and the inside is removed. What's going to be the law? And the just want to look at the Vilna Gaon's commentary on it. Vilna Gaon says like this about this. It says, according to the Vilna Gaon, Gemara is discussing a case where the larger sheaf was protruding beyond the confines of the row, and the inner side refers to the part that's aligned with the other sheaves, and the outer side refers to the portion of the sheaf that juts outside the row. And presumably the Gemara's question is that whether a half sheaf can join together with the other sheaves and form a single row if no part of it is currently in alignment with it. So Vilna Gaon explains that this abnormally large sheaf is also out of alignment with it. It's not in a straight line. And so that's how he's understanding. He's understanding it that maybe it's a little bit to the right of the rest of the row, or a little bit to the left, and now you're removing this, the inner side or the outer side, and then what's going to be the status of these sheaves now that they're going to wonder, is this connected? Okay. Similarly, if he removed only the upper side of the large sheaf, there is no question that the remaining lower side of the sheaf is judged in conjunction with the two sheaves ahead of it as a shikha exempt row. Gemara continues, says, if, however, he removed the lower side of the sheaf, keeping the upper side suspended in midair by supporting it with a piece of wood, what is the law insofar as judging the remaining upper side in conjunction with the two sheaves ahead of the row of these 3 consecutive sheaves? And this, by the way, is an unresolved inquiry. We don't know what the answer is. The Mara Fulda asks to explain this. He says, does the absence of the sheaf's lower half constitute a separation that prevents the upper half from being viewed together with the following two sheaves as a shikha exempt row? Or perhaps is this not deemed a separation since both halves are regarded as parts of the same single sheaf? So in the last question, they're also asking the same thing. Does this create a separation? If you're removing the inner part and it's out of alignment, and part of why it could also be out of alignment is because it's an abnormally large sheaf, and you're removing the inner part and it's out of alignment, and Vilna Gaon's reading it that it's also out, it's not lined up with it, and now you're coming and you're taking it so that if you're taking away 1.5 times of it, for example, now you've created this space because what was there is gone from the inside part. From the outside part, if you're removing the outside part, there's no problem. You could still see it as being connected. But now you have this very, very, very big sheaf that's not big enough to constitute one that gets, for final, transport. We know that there's a special rule for, okay, all the sheaves go for final transport. We're talking about a very, very large sheaf. Maybe it's connected with, lots of other, these smaller sheaves. And there's a couple of smaller sheaves that are there in a row. But now they remove the inside part of the half of this very, very large one. So now you have this space and it's out of alignment and it doesn't connect. And so now, as we can see from what the Mara Fulda is pointing out from this second part of the inquiry, which is unresolved, there's the absence of the sheaf's, other half, constitute a separation that prevents the, other half being viewed together with the following, other sheafs as a shkika exempt row. Or could we look at it, I'm just paraphrasing Mara Fulda, or could we look at it as not deemed a separation since, both the halves are regarded as, part of the single sheaf. So we don't know the answer to that. and we'll be able to ask this from Eliyahu Hanavi. I can spend a lot of time sitting there arguing each way, each side, and I'm sure you could too, and you could see it both ways. We're just not sure what the halacha would be. It's beautiful and it's amazing that Rabbi Yochanan put these unresolved inquiries into the Shas. Why? These are tools for us to be able to have the vision and the eyes to see with simanim the real messianic figure that comes to rebuild the temple and the announcing, and Eliyahu Navi is going to come and clean up all these inquiries. We have to have inquiries to know, and these are inquiries that Rabbi Yochanan and the sages labored over, and they can't come up with a resolution on it. So if we didn't have these things, we might get misled. And unless somebody comes along and can answer all of these questions with all the details and implications, so everybody everybody who learns it, like you and me, where we're sitting there going over all these issues, over all the implications and how each detail works, unless these people who come can satisfy an explanation to people like Rabbi Kanievsky and to you who are sitting here laboring over this abnormally large sized sheaf and can understand how it would work from removing the inside or the outside. Unless there's a figure that can come and answer all these things, it's not a real Eliyahu Navi and not a real messianic figure. The real messianic figure that comes and who rebuilds the temple, and he's going to know this stuff because he's sitting there digging into the details. So the Gemara is going to continue, and we're going to get into these topics of upper and lower objects. So we were talking about what happens if you're moving the lower part of the sheaf and somehow you suspend it in midair, the upper part. So there's a story, a very famous story, about the law of Eglah Arufa. Eglah Arufa is the decapitated calf, and that's in Devarim 21. Pasuk 1 starts in Pasuk 1. And it's talking about if somebody gets murdered and there's nobody who witnesses it, it's in the open field, it's unknown who killed him, that they measure from the nearest corpse to the nearest town, and that, by the way, would be, some indication of likeliness or likelihood of where the murderer came from. And the elders, they bring out a calf to an untilled valley, and they decapitate it from the back of the neck. They wash their hands over the dead calf. They make a statement declaring that they are in no way responsible for the murder, and the Kohanim have to be there to pray for their atonement. A very serious thing, and it wants to now talk about laws that are dealing with it. So when Rav, the sugya reads, when Rav went down to there, Babylonia, listen to this story. He declared, I am the Ben Azai of here. In other words, what he's trying to say by saying that, he's saying, my mind is particularly clear today, and I'm ready to answer all questions with the same degree of sharpness and depth of Ben Azai, who would expound in the old days in the market of Tiberias. That's quite a statement. This, by the way, is also paralleled in the Bavli and Sota 45a. In Bavli Sota 45a, instead of saying that it's Rav, over there it's saying it's Abaya said it. That in the Bavli it's saying Baya went and made this declaration that he's like Ben Azai, and he could answer any questions. And he was confronted by a certain rabbi who asked a similar question to the one which this old man who's going to come and confront Rav. the Sidei Yeshua is pointing out that Rav's proclamation is pretentious, and you know that it's really a shocking statement for one of the big gadolim to come and make such a statement. So story says like this: says when Rav went down there to Bavel, he declared, "I am the Ben Azai of here." And in other words, he's able to answer all these questions with the same sharpness of Ben Azai, who would be in the markets of Tiberias to answer all the questions. And a certain old man came and inquired of him, and says the following question. It says, if two murder victims, so notice that it's not one dead person and a murder victim, it's two murdered people. If two murdered victims are found one on top of the other, with one being a bit closer to one city and the other being a bit closer to another city, are both cities obligated to bring the Eglah Arufa? That was his question. In other words, by the way, this point by this old man, I mean, this is going to become clear in the next set of Gemaras. So the Mishnah in Sota chapter 9 Halacha 2 says, because that's about the Eglah Arufa. By the way, Eglah Arufa being a person who's murdered in absence, where there's no witnesses, this is put into Sota because just like the adulterous woman goes and commits a horrible sin where perhaps she's making mamzerim and she's murdering her marriage and she's murdering herself and her soul and the other person who's there because it's a death penalty crime, and but it's all done hidden and in secret. And that's why the laws for Eglah Arufa are put into Sota, because these are the laws where only God knows and can judge the real outcome of this. And to our eyes, these things are hidden. There is somebody who knows about the crime, but it's hidden to the rest of the society. And that's the same with the person who cheats with a married woman and brings death upon himself and the other person and destroys. And that's why the Eglah Arufa is, all the laws are listed over there. So over there in Sota 2 says that the Eglah Arufa is brought when the corpse is found exposed and lying on the ground. But chapter 9 Halacha 2 says, if, however, the corpse was hidden by a pile of stones or it's elevated above the ground, no Eglah Arufa is brought. And in the Yerushalmi, they bring scriptural sources for these conditions, and they prove it deraita this way over there. So you can check in the Yerushalmi in chapter 9, Halacha 2. They will bring sources to prove that these, as they call it, a floating corpse, where it's not actually on the ground, that there's a scriptural source for this. So the old man is arguing that basically, since the bottom corpse is covered by the top corpse, and the top corpse is elevated above the ground by the bottom corpse, there is no Eglah Arufa obligation for either city. That's basically what the old man here is arguing. Mara Fulda, based on Bavli Sota 45a, comments the following. He's saying that Rav is of the opinion that since the corpses are of one kind, in other words, we know that in Bavli Pesachim 29b, a kind with its own kind does not interpose, so that the top corpse is considered to be lying directly on the ground. And similarly, Rav held that the bottom corpse cannot be considered hidden when covered only by another corpse, because he's arguing from Bavli Pesachim 29 this idea that a kind with its own kind does not interpose. We're going to see elements of this in Truma, where things that are connected are going to be alike. and that there's no imposition of it. And that comes up a lot in Masechet Truma with all sorts of things about separation. So this is basically what Rav is arguing. And the old man is arguing something a little bit different. So the Gemara says like this. It says, Rav considered saying that they do decapitate a calf. In other words, the elders of each city are obligated to bring an Eglah Arufa on account of the corpse that is closer to them. The old man said to him, in the sugya, says, you are wrong. They do not decapitate a calf for either city. And Rav said to him, why? And the old man replied, a calf is not decapitated on account of the bottom corpse because it is hidden by the top corpse. And the calf is not decapitated on account of the top corpse because it is a floating corpse. In other words, on the bottom corpse, it's not, it's on the bottom corpse and it's not touching the ground. So Rav is going to reply like this, or the sugya is going to say like this. It says, when Rav ascended back to here, Eretz Yisrael, he went to Rebbe and recounted the discussion he had with the old man. And Rebbe said to him, he spoke properly to you. For the Torah introduces the passage of the decapitated calf with the phrase, should a corpse be found? And what they're saying, by using the singular term, yim matzeh, the verse implies that the Eglah Arufa is brought only if a single corpse is found, but not if multiple corpses are found one on top of another. So Rebbe comes back to Rav and replies, hey, the Torah itself uses it in the singular. It says a corpse. It doesn't say corpses. So he's saying that he's right. Now, just as a, explanation on it, looking at a commentary by a book from Karen Ora in Sota 45a, basically says that in principle, Rebbe accepts Rav's reasoning that the two corpses being of one kind do not construe an imposition or covering with respect to the other, thus precluding their being exempted as a floating or hidden corpse. But as for the actual halacha is concerned, he agrees that there's no Eglah Arufa obligation for either city, as the old man argued, because the Torah limits the Eglah Arufa requirement to cases involving a single corpse. In other words, Rav's point was right. Rav was right that, it's all connected. It's just like what in the principle in Pesachim. But what Rebbe pointed out, Doraita, which is why the old man was right, was that it's in the singular. And because it's in the singular, there's no Eglah Arufa brought for either corpse. And that's the point of the old man, says Rebbe. Gemara is going to continue. It's going to say, the Gemara cites a baraisa that's relevant to the earlier discussion about this 3-row sheaf. Okay, so in the organization of this, we're going to get back to talking about what we talked about before the story with the 3-row sheaf. And then after we talk about what's coming up with this stream or river or water canal, we're going to go back to talking about the halachas of one thing on top of another thing. Okay, so it's going to get back to, it's a little out of order, but okay, this is going to talk about what we were talking about before this story about the corpse. And then after, we're going to talk about things that are related, that are just like the corpse, but dealing with shchicha and farming. Okay, so it's a little out of order, but it's still connected. Don't worry. So the Gemara is going to talk about, things with the 3-row sheaf. Rabbi Yehuda, the eminent one, says, I didn't put that in, that's what the Gemara literally says. Rabbi Yehuda, the eminent one, says, if there is a water canal across the entire field traversing the rows of sheaves, the law is as follows. If the canal is so wide that when plowing the field, one must raise the plowshare from this side and place it down on the other side, the sheaves on the other side of the canal are not judged together as a row. But if the canal is not wide enough to necessitate lifting the plowshare, the sheaves are judged together as a row and are exempt from shchicha. This, by the way, is what we learned before in Masechet Peah, that if you have terraced fields that go up along a mountain or a hill, and you have to lift up the plow to get up to the next terrace in this terraced hilly field, that constitutes a separate field for Peah. And if you don't have to, it's still connected, it still counts as one field. So the same thing would be here. If you have to lift the plowshare, then it's considered, and let's say you have row sheaf 4 and 5 on the left side of the canal, and you have sheaf number 6 on the right side of the canal. So if you have to lift the plow to cross the canal and go over to the right side, then it is not connected, it's not a row. And by the way, it would, for Peah, count as 2 fields. We already established this. This is the same as being on a terraced hill. So this would constitute a division that's wide enough to separate, to make it into 2 fields. Okay, if the separation is not very big, and the canal isn't so wide, and you really can continue just plowing, okay, then it's not really very much of a canal, and these sheaves would be connected. Now, this is really not even like a canal; it's really like an irrigation area where you're funneling water to it's a very shallow thing that you're funneling water into to redistribute it down into the field. Now, in a case where you had like a really narrow, small little stream, not even stream, it's like if you put a hose where it ran some water down to split it so that you could rechannel it down. And these are very, very thin, they're very small. They use these in very dry areas to irrigate, and it's not like a real canal like you're imagining. These are like little tiny amounts of water that are channeled to distribute it across a field, but it's like, I don't know, it's like an amount that you would have from like a water hose that you left on, and then you started to thin it out, and then you start to channel this water into areas of a field to water it. Okay, this is really small time stuff. And what they're saying is that just like over here on a very, very small time thing like this, it wouldn't separate to make 2 fields, and it wouldn't separate to make it into 2 rows, that this would still be connected, because you effectively can still do the work on the left side and the right side. But if you have something that's really built in place and it's really significant enough where you have to lift this thing up and move it, then row number 4, 5, and 6 will really be counted as a broken row. It's not connected together. So the way that they're saying it is that if you have to raise the plow from this side and place it down on the other side, that's going to be enough to separate it. But if you're not doing it, you can just take the animal on the plow and go from the left side to the right side without doing anything different, then it's not a separation. It's not significant. So the Gemara is going to ask a question, and it's going to say, if one reaped half a row and it became dark and he had to stop, and he came back on the following day to finish the job, and there's no question that the remaining half is judged as a new and independent row, so that the first grain is exempt from shchicha as the beginning of the row. Gemara reads, says, if, however, he reaped half a row and he sat down and ate, or he sat down to nap, or his friend called him away and it got dark and he had to go light a lamp, what is the law? In other words, the question's asking, is the remaining half considered an independent row on account of these relatively short, brief interruptions? So we know that if he's, doing it on day number one and then he's finishing the job on day number two, and there's no question here that the remaining half that's done on day number two is going to be judged as a new row from what you did on day number one. Okay, so day number one and day number two don't connect. They're asking if the guy takes a 15-minute nap, is that going to count it for half of the work being done as an independent row? Let's say the guy comes, harvests sheaf number 1, 2, and 3, and then he goes and he takes a nap for 15 minutes, or he's called by a friend to go light a lamp, and he harvests it and he ties sheaf number 4 and 5. Okay, no problem. Is 4 and 5 going to be connected to 1, 2, and 3? Or is 4 and 5 going to count as only 4 and 5? And row number 1, 2, and 3 is going to count as 1, 2, and 3, which was before the nap. That's really what it's asking. And the Gemara leaves this unresolved. We don't know what the answer is. Eliyahu Navi will come and tell us, and we can go and argue either way, but we're really not sure what the halacha lemaisa would be. So the Mishnah stated that a sheaf that one took hold of in order to bring to the city does not become shchicha if it is subsequently forgotten in the field. And the the Gemara cited the Brisa that discusses a related law. This is in Tosefta 3:7, and here's what it says. Okay, we're going to get into upper ones and lower ones. So this is going to connect back to the Eglah Arufa story and the principle behind it. Okay, so it's not out of place. The sugya says, if one took hold of a sheaf in order to take it to the city, and he placed it on top of another sheaf, and he subsequently forgot both of them, the lower one is shchicha, says the Gemara, and the upper one is not shchicha. Rabbi Shimon says, both of them are not shchicha. The lower one is not shchicha because it is covered by the upper one. And the upper one is not shchicha because he has already acquired it. So, just like what we were looking at with the Eglah Arufa, here's a similar case. I'd like to look at the Beurim of Rabbi Moshe Feinstein in Safe 125 to help us to understand this. And here's the explanation from Rabbi Moshe Feinstein on this. Rabbi Zera is asserting that although the Tanna Kama does not accept Rabbi Shimon's automatic exemption with regards to the hidden produce, he agrees that the sheaf which was overlooked on account of the external factors, rather than on account of simple forgetfulness, is indeed an exemption from shchicha. Thus, in a case where the visible upper sheaf was not forgotten, the Tanna Kama admits that the lower sheaf is exempt from shchicha, for then we presume that the lower sheaf was forgotten only or solely as a result of the fact that it was hidden from view. It is only in a case where both the lower and upper sheaves were forgotten that the Tanna Kama declares the lower sheaf shchicha, because when that happens, it is evident that the lower sheaf would have been forgotten even if it had not been visible. And therefore, the harvester's forgetting of it cannot be blamed on the fact that it was covered. By the way, the understanding in Matanos Aniyim by the Rambam, in his Hilchos on it, in chapter 5, Halacha 4, is matching this. So that's the big question. So the Gemara is going to get into Rabbi Zera's statement with another Amarah, in a different context, similar to this with what Rabbi Shimon's saying, and similar to what the Eglah Arufa, what the law for what happened with Eglah Arufa between Rav and this old man. So the Gemara reads, this statement of Rabbi Zera accords with Rabbi Yonah, for Rabbi Yonah said in regard to the Mishnah ruling in chapter 5, Halacha 6, in Peah, that a sheep that was obscured by a covering of straw is not subject to shchicha. So the Mishnah's exemption is applicable only where, says the Gemara, the harvester remembers the straw itself. In the case where this is now, I'm just noting from the Pnei Moshe, in a case where we can attribute his forgetting of the underlying sheaf to the fact that it was concealed from the view. So the point is, if he overlooks the straw as well, the sheaf beneath it does become shchicha, because it's clear that he would have forgotten the sheaf even if it had not been covered. So Rabbi Zera says in the Gemara here regarding the case of a sheaf covered by another sheaf, that the lower sheaf is exempt from the shchicha according to the Tanna Kama only in the case where the harvester remembers the upper sheaf. So basically what he's saying is that if he forgets the lower sheaf, but not in an instance where he forgets both the lower and the upper sheaf. If he forgets both the upper and the lower sheaf, then it's going to be shchicha. But if he only forgets the lower one because it was hidden, then it's not going to be shchicha. So I just want to give you an alternate reading of this, and this is going to be the approach from the Rambam in trying to understand this. Is his from his Hilchos Matanos Aniyim, chapter 5, Halacha 4. So Rabbi Zera is coming to qualify the position of the Tanna Kama by stating that the Tanna Kama agrees with Rabbi Shimon in a case where the upper sheaf is remembered. So that's a key point by the Rambam. Rambam's pointing out about the upper sheaf being remembered, and in which case then there's going to be no disagreement at all between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Shimon. So what the Rambam's pointing out is that if you look at it from the Tanna Kama's point of view, and you look at it from Rabbi Shimon's point of view, where the upper sheaf is not remembered, then okay, that is what it is, right? But if the upper sheaf is actually remembered, then according to the position of the Tanna Kama, then it's actually in agreement with Rabbi Shimon's ruling, and there's no disagreement at all. That's the insight by the Rambam in Hilchos Matanos Aniyim. And so it's a very interesting, clever way to read it, so that there's no malochet at all if he's remembering the upper one. But if he's not remembering the upper one, then the statement by Rabbi Shimon and the statement by the Tanna Kama would be true. But they're just talking about different parts of the law. If you're talking about where the top part is remembered, then there's actually no disagreement at all. So that's a neat reading by the Rambam. The Mishnah was talking about sheaves that are arranged in rows, and that they're going to be rendered shchicha when they're bypassed in the collection process. Okay, collection process is a big deal because that's sort of we have to put a boundary here somewhere. When is it going to be shchicha 6 months from now when you have grain maybe in storage or something? No, we have to set a standard. So they're talking about this collection process as part of this standard. Gemara reads that in the case of a field whose sheaves were in disarray, totally out of order, they're not in rows, they're thrown all over the place, it's really disheveled and disorganized. You have some bad workers here, you got to replace them. But nonetheless, it's all over the place. There's no rows. What are you going to do? So Gemara reads like this. It says, and the farmer forgot one of them. So the Gemara says, it is not shchicha until he removes the surrounding sheaves. So the Mara Fulda points out that since the collection process in the field does not follow any defined route, the Torah's injunction of not to return is applicable until all the surrounding sheaves have been removed. So, in other words, if it's all in this weird, non-defined way, there's no rows, basically as he's collecting it, if he collects it in a way where he carves out a space in the collection where it starts to separate these sheaves, and then you have these gaps that are unconnected to these other disheveled things, and then with say one in the middle that's really not connected anymore visually from the others, and then he overlooks that and goes on and continues to collect the rest of them, that would make it shchicha. But in the case where he leaves surrounding sheaves there that are still connected visually to these other sheaves, and he's continuing to work and it's part of the work process, then that is not going to be shchicha at all. So basically, it says it is not shchicha until he removes the surrounding sheaves, and that's the point. Thank you so much.